Therapist perception.
Bachelorette.
Emily in Paris, season 3.
Mm-hmm. And also, just to reiterate, we are giving our therapist perspective. We're not criticizing the show, although it's not great, but it's fun and entertaining. And so we're going to talk about it.
Can I just real quick? The Bachelor franchise is so much better than this garbage.
It absolutely is.
But I did find it entertaining and all of that stuff. It was fine. I watched it. I enjoyed it. Yada, yada.
Pretty clothes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's get into it.
Okay, so we were thinking that because there's like a big cast of characters, it might be simplest if we go through kind of like each of the more prominent relationships and talk about them and like talk about healthy versus unhealthy, or maybe aspects of it that we saw that might fit into each category. Mm-hmm. So who should we start with?
Let's start with Emily and Alfie.
Okay. Emily and Alfie. So they start out the season
not together.
Together.
But she thought they were together?
I thought that they started out and I only know this because insomnia. We need an episode on sleep, by the way, for me. I woke up this morning and I was like, what was the first episode again? And they were actually still in Paris and he was going back to London and Emily was planning a going away party for him.
Oh, you're right. Okay. So it was the next episode that he was still there. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then
he lied to her later after she put her work over him and his goodbye party.
And made everything about
she
her.
Promised and made everything about her. Yeah.
No judgment.
So that's how that started.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So yeah, just to give the landscape of the relationship, Emily and Alfie got together in season 2. While she was still
very much in love with Gabriel.
Yeah. Yes. And so she and Alfie got together in season 2, continued their relationship in the opening of season 3. Part of what was the big dilemma at the end of season 2 was that Alfie is going back to London because that's where he's from and that's where his job is. And so there's this whole idea around like, we'll need to be in a long distance relationship. And it turns out, yes, unbeknownst to Emily, that Alfie has been offered a job so conveniently by one of Emily's marketing clients to remain in Paris and remain living and working in Paris in order for them to continue their relationship. And so much of season 3 centers around their relationship. And Alfie essentially says to her numerous times, I feel like you have one foot out of this relationship. And we see that consistently. And you pointed out the first time we see that is, again, episode 1, where he is, again, moving away and they're beginning their journey of being in a long distance relationship, which is challenging. And she is so focused and so self-centered around her own, job situation that she can't be emotionally present for him while he is getting ready to pack up his life and leave, and also spend quality time with her boyfriend before he goes. But on the night of the party, MIA, she decides to pick work over him and his party. And so that kind of sets the tone really for the rest of their relationship. And she gets frustrated with him later on because he goes back to London to visit his mother. And she expectantly, is like, oh,
what'd you say about me?
Yeah. What'd you say about me? Mm-hmm. And he shares that like, he didn't tell his mother about Emily because of a lack of trust, basically, given his own experiences. And she's really upset about that and basically manipulates this kind of like outing of their relationship before he's ready to. And
well, she makes it about her.
Yeah.
And she doesn't try to help him feel more comfortable in the relationship. Mm-hmm. She just wanted the confirmation that their relationship was in a place that she had expected it to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then she ended up, again, he was right all along, 1 foot out. She was not in it with him. She was in love with someone else. And so I feel like that the backstory is relevant because this is a relationship that like you see them both fighting for it, but in different ways and for different reasons. And this is an example of like, what are you actually fighting for though? You know, like he seemed so invested and so into her. And despite him continuing to say to her, I feel like you're not here. I feel like you're not in this. He was consistently disappointed. And yet he was still all in and still kind of like took these big vulnerable leaps and still trusted her. But why? She did nothing to earn that trust. And Emily too, knowing that she wasn't fully in, kept pursuing and trying to kind of like
have him that she was in.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, kind of, they were both fighting for the relationship when it was so very clearly not working. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about this a lot, again, when in the Bachelor franchise, especially Bachelor in Paradise, this is such a good example of that dynamic that we often see.
Right.
What were you thinking about them?
No, I wrote down the exact same kind of thing about him being afraid to tell her, mm-hmm. to tell his family about her and why that was, and that how much it had to do with trust in the relationship, mm-hmm. and how she kept reassuring him afterwards, but it was totally inauthentic.
It was very empty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so like in our main discussion of our episode about unhealthy relationships, we had talked about some indicators of unhealthy relationships and some of them like related to a lack of trust. Some of them related to kind of maybe sacrificing too much of yourself or maybe a little bit too much compromise. Mm-hmm. And I think we saw that a lot on Alfie's end. And it ended up really blowing up in his face, mm-hmm.
at
the end. It was not very, I would categorize that as a not healthy relationship.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think even to just reiterate what we had talked about in terms of how lack of trust could be an indicator that if in this case, if Emily was all in and she was concerned with Alfie feeling like if she was concerned with Alfie's feelings and how he needed her to earn that trust, that could have happened. Mm-hmm. So these things like it was unhealthy because of how she was out the door, but it could have been something that was healthy. It could have been something like she could have earned that trust and
mm-hmm.
she could have, that relationship could have turned around if her feelings were different and if she
were more invested in him and rather like the relationship.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes we talk about that differently. Like we talk about the relationship being the focus, but I almost felt like in this and in another relationship that we'll get to, it felt like you're chasing the idea of the relationship rather than like thinking about the person and whether or not you're compatible.
Next up, who do you want to talk about?
Let's go to Camille and Gabriel.
Okay. So I guess just to kind of summarize their whole situation, because they started off this season having just moved in together. Mm-hmm. And Gabriel in a very similar situation as Emily, where he clearly still has feelings for her. They have this whole will they, won't they thing happening, continues to pursue this relationship with Camille. And what I wanted to highlight here was the infidelity that was going on in this season, but also relate it back to the infidelity that had previously happened actually, was it? I guess it wasn't technically infidelity, but there was.
It was like a Ross and Rachel, we are on a break.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Right. When Gabrielle and Emily did hook up. What I did want to highlight here was how Camille stepped out of the relationship and her relationship with Sophia. Is that her name? Something like that.
The artist from Greece.
Yes. How Camille's relationship that she was building with this woman, simultaneously living with Gabrielle, the narrative that was kind of being painted around this was she's never with Gabrielle. He's too busy with the restaurant, although he's with Emily quite a bit. He's too busy with the restaurant. He doesn't have time for her. There's not enough quality time that they're spending there. I see him less now that we live together than I did before. That was kind of like the narrative that was being painted in this season, was like, he doesn't have time for me and I have needs and I'm going to look for them elsewhere, which like that happens.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah. A lot. And there was much more of a deep rooted thing going on between Camille and Gabrielle that makes their relationship unhealthy. And that has to do with their history. And it even started before Gabrielle and Emily got together. So yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up here.
Well, so they've been in a relationship for 5 years, on again, off again. And what we see in the first season, we talked about power dynamics, right? Like in our full length episode on relationships. And one of the points of contention between them was around the fact that Camille's family has a lot of wealth, and Gabrielle doesn't yet. And he's kind of like more of a self-made kind of entrepreneurial guy. And there was, in the first season, a lot of insistence around just take my parents' money and, build this restaurant, and like this conflict around, again, like power. And in his mind, how he viewed, in that sense, power and control going hand in hand, and putting his future in the hands of someone that's, not his family. And so that we saw that at the beginning. And so like, we knew that there was a little bit of like rockiness. It seemed like that wasn't the first time that we saw that. So it seemed like, again, very clear that there were these power dynamics at play.
So you think that the shift in him becoming successful, him having his own restaurant, that power shift happened, and therefore then she goes outside of the relationship to get back some power?
Ooh, I hadn't thought of that. Interesting. I do wonder, like, so in the first season as well, as you alluded to, like Emily and Gabrielle had sex, which was a betrayal to Camille doubly by Gabrielle and by Emily, who was one of her close friends. And that doesn't get revealed until the second season. And so a lot of the second season is around kind of like holding this secret, and will Camille find out? And then she does. And so there's this like repair that needs to happen, which I know we're not talking about season 2, but which Emily made all about herself. And then, so in season 3, there is a part of me that wondered, is that the power that's being chased? Is you did this and you had the freedom to like explore your feelings with someone else, Gabrielle. So me, Camille, like I see this opportunity and I have these needs. like, not that that was a conscious choice, but I wonder if there was a little bit of like having some permission to take some power back in that way. And like, there is, one could argue, a little bit of a hypocriticalness for, you know, Gabrielle to be upset. You know, I could imagine an argument unfolding where Camille's like, well, you did this. Mm-hmm. How is this different from what you did? Mm-hmm. I could clearly see that happening. So I'm wondering if there was an element of that. It didn't seem, like you said, that wasn't part of the narrative that was being painted. But I do think we do see shifts in power or changes in power within their relationship over the last 3 seasons, for sure. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that you were talking about too, in terms of that narrative, like we talk about this a lot, like when we talk about relationships is, and we talked about this a bunch today, like dealing with conflict. It is problematic, right? Like that Camille is feeling like her needs aren't being met, that she's not getting time or attention or affection from her partner that she lives with. That's a problem, or that's a problem that she's experiencing. I don't know what that looked like in terms of the way that she communicated it to Gabrielle. And it seemed like in some ways, like it was communicated in a roundabout way. Like, I think Alfie had to tell Gabrielle, like somehow it was orchestrated that Gabrielle shut down the restaurant and just they have a date night together. Yeah. But that wasn't directly Camille saying, I miss you. Yeah. Like, I miss us. I really want to spend time together. It was not direct communication. It was very beating around the bush, passive communication. And it, again, didn't address the underlying needs that she was having and the need in the relationship. We also talk so much when we talk about infidelity, that it's a symptom of something greater going on in a relationship. And we see in some ways infidelity happening for Gabrielle through all 3 seasons, in terms of the emotional affair that he's having with Emily, and Camille in season 3. And so again, it's a very symptomatic relationship. And
I also want to go back to what you said about just like, I mean, what we were both talking about with the power dynamic, that now I don't know if this is being thrown out there as a potential what's happening in season 4, or if, I don't know, but is Camille really pregnant? Mm. Because, and she totally could be, and this would still fit, but if the power shift, if she was taking back power in the relationship and going outside of the relationship with Sophia, then, and it still wasn't giving her, like it was becoming more and more of a relationship, and it wasn't giving her what she wanted, or really like what her mom wanted for her. And that was Gabrielle. Mm-hmm. And so to orchestrate another kind of like power play to create this I'm pregnant story comes back in of I now need you, which one could think, well, Gabrielle now has power because he's needed. But what is it? But in like an incongruous hierarchy where the one person that's like the quote unquote sick one, right? Like women are sick when they're pregnant, right? when someone's like quote unquote sick, that they're both powerful and powerless, because they're powerless because they're sick, but they're powerful because they're directing somebody to care for them. So she now put herself in this position of Gabrielle now needs to do this for me. So that could have been kind of like a thing that she did. I don't know. We don't know.
It could or could, regardless of is she, isn't she? Right.
It still was.
It still was. And again, it didn't sound, again, what we heard from Gabrielle was what she came back to tell me was, I was assuming that she had this relationship and yada, yada. No, that wasn't it. It was, I'm pregnant and the baby's yours. And so again, like, I think it was a power play in some way. If those two pieces of information were not presented, then yes, it's a play for power in some way. Do you know what I mean? Like it just, totally. It feels a little bit like a power grab in some way.
No, she ultimately made a decision at the end. She had this moment where she realized, like, you know what, this is not what I want. This is what I've been told that I've needed, and I've been told I wanted. And so I kind of played into that. But like, this is not healthy. And you're in love with somebody else. And she walked out.
Yeah.
I think you're right in that, like, it's in the betrayal, and it's not in the betrayal of one time and like making a mistake in a relationship. But that continuous relationship, this continuous emotional affair is what that like betrayal truly was. And like in that, no, you clearly did not love both of these people.
And the ongoing lack of honesty, but like kind of, the ongoing kind of like illusion that your relationship is one thing, your relationship with Camille is one thing, and your relationship with Emily is something very different and platonic. That was just so ongoing. The ongoing dishonesty is more, I guess, what I'm talking about, that it was so embedded in the relationship between Emily and Gabriel. It was very undermining to his relationship with Camille.
Yeah. So
unhealthy or healthy?
Unhealthy.
Yeah. Camille said so. She was right.
Yes.
Okay, who's up? Who's next?
So, I mean, we can kind of loop these last couple together, just because Mindy's a part of them, right? But who I wanted to highlight was Mindy and Benoit first. So Mindy and Benoit started off the season pretty hot and heavy, and yet something that they were battling in the previous season was when Benoit found out that Mindy comes from a family of like a ton of wealth, and he didn't see how they were going to work after knowing that. And yet they got through it, supposedly, and they continued their relationship into this season, and then it came up again. And it came up again when Benoit seemed pretty intimidated by Mindy's friend from boarding school, who clearly did have a lot of money. And so this fight came up again between them. And recurring fights don't necessarily point to unhealthy relationships, but if it's recurring and you're just this problem is perpetuating, and you're not looking to solve the actual root of the problem, it can be unhealthy.
For sure. Well, and I was just actually thinking, this is a little plug for our next episode with one of our colleagues, Carly King, but she just kind of recorded a video for us around kind of arguments. And she had said, and I know obviously you know this to be true too, but like typically couples do have like just a couple of recurrent fights. Like the focus of the argument is generally kind of the same. And it does seem like that was true for them, that it centered around essentially Benoit's insecurity.
And she said this again. So she thought they were past it. And clearly he was still hanging on to it. And the fact that he was still hanging on to it and didn't tell her, and they didn't actually work through it, says a lot about the relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, you know, we see him come back at the end with like a different story, because he was not only intimidated by Nico because of his wealth, but also Nico was essentially offering Benoit money for a song that he wrote about Mindy. And that again talked about power. Like that probably felt to Benoit like a power grab, like, oh, I can do you this favor, and I have money that I can give to you for this thing that you did. And so Benoit was like, no, not doing that. And then at the end, he's like, oh, the reason that I didn't want to do. And so again, like, why are you withholding information? And again, it just seems so, Benoit's got some work to do around around his kind of like self-esteem and self-worth. Cause it again felt rooted in insecurity and need for power. And he also seemed kind of threatened, just like pretty easily threatened. So, but as we're saying this, I also just we saw that happen another time in the season with a different relationship. And that was with Sylvie, Emily's boss. And she was dating Eric, the photographer, who was pretty significantly younger than her. And so I guess to frame it in power, Sylvie had a lot more power than Eric, right? She was his boss in a lot of ways, actually quite literally, right? Like she hired him. Yeah. He was a contractor for her. And she was older and she had more wealth and she was more established. And so there was already kind of like this power differential. Granted, Eric was young and attractive
and her exes were showing up and he had no say in it.
Yes. And that was a huge focal point of season 3 is that, her husband, not.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Not an ex.
Her husband, whom she's still married to, continued to show up, and he expressed like his discomfort with that. And so there is an element of like a lot of his insecurity came through, and also he was valid in terms of like, this is not comfortable, not a very standard arrangement. And it makes sense that someone would not feel totally comfortable with that. And Sylvie was expecting Eric to sacrifice, right? Like his comfort for the comfort of her situation. This is like something that works for her, but it didn't work for him. And he wasn't willing to make that sacrifice. And she really wanted him to. And so it just was making me think of, in both of these relationships, we see kind of like men with these like insecurities that start to like kind of unravel the relationship a little bit, just in the way that they handle the situations. So what do you think, Mindy and Benoit? I don't love it.
No.
But I think the jury's still out.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
The part of me that really likes Mindy, like the human part of me, is like, Mindy, you could do so much better.
Yeah.
Well, and what was unhealthy was like breaking up over it and not like you're worth me trying to work on this.
Okay, so good distinction, right? Like there are aspects of Mindy and Benoit's relationship that are unhealthy, and in the way that they maybe communicate or deal with conflict might not be the healthiest, but we don't know if their relationship is doomed or not. Yeah. It might be repairable. We don't know enough. We might see in season 4, but that's a lot of what we talked about today was like, okay, just because we see these things doesn't mean it's gonna be terrible.
Yeah, that they shouldn't be together.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see what happens if they work through this. I just wanted to talk about Emily in general.
Is this a critique?
I'm going to try really, really hard to be as objective as possible in what I'm about to say. Because I was really reflecting on Emily. Obviously, it's called Emily in Paris. So the show's about Emily and all of these like relationships and debacle she gets into. Emily is so very self-focused and so very self-motivated. And it impacts in such a negative way. I want to say every single relationship that she has. But yeah, I mean, just off the top of my head, I can go down the list. Like episode 1 of the season, her big drama is, I don't want it, like, and I think what makes it really hard for Emily in her mind is that it's well-intended. I don't want to hurt Madeline's feelings. So I'm going to lie to her and still work for her because I don't want to leave her barefoot and pregnant. Like she's some like unsuccessful, completely unresourceful person. And so Emily like puts herself in this position and creates this whole drama around, oh, I can't possibly do this. And that becomes like the focal point of the first couple of episodes, is that she betrays Madeline. She betrays Sylvie. She negatively impacts her relationship with Alfie as a result, because she kind of like makes it all about her. As a coworker, she's not a team player, although I think Emily would disagree. I think she is someone that believes that the ends do justify the means. You know, if the client buys this pitch, then it's all good, but not really thinking about who she's leaving in her wake. And we see Julian most specifically get impacted by this. We saw a little bit in season 2, but a lot in season 3, to the point where he's looking for other jobs. And he has said to Sylvie, like, this is not cool. Like she completely took over. And again, Emily is well-meaning maybe, but there is an aspect of like, she's got to be in control. She's got to save the day. She's got to be liked by everyone. And that is pretty selfish, actually. But there are some traits of narcissism that are present with Emily, because this idea that everything falls apart, you know, without her, or that everyone needs her, or she needs everyone to like her. She's very self-absorbed, and it's probably why it's really challenging for her to have successful relationships with her coworkers, her neighbors, and her friend. I even think she was pretty selfish when it came to Mindy. And of course, with Camille as well. Like, she's really thinking about her needs, even when she thinks she's thinking about someone else's. Season 2, the whole thing was like, I've got to get Camille and Gabriel back together. And it's because it was her own guilt. Like, if they got back together, that erases the fact that you slept with your friend's boyfriend. So it's that kind of stuff. And so I just felt like Emily's self-centeredness is a huge problem. And again, we talked about this on the episode, like an indicator of an unhealthy relationship is when someone makes it all about them. And that is pretty much what she does.
In all of them.
So I'm sorry, I just ranted for like 1,000 minutes.
No, it was needed. I hope Emily heard that.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Your Emily Talk.
My Emily Talk.
Yeah, no. Emily, speaking of people having a lot to work on, Emily's got a lot to work on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she will.
I don't think she's aware enough yet. And I think part of the problem is that things keep working out.
Yeah.
And so like, and for better or worse. And like, yes, it's a show and like, it's about Emily, but this happens in life, right? Like, we talk about this a lot, like people's resourcefulness, the way that people get their needs met. People are really successful at this, even when it's maladaptive, even when it's not healthy. She's still able to garner support, to have people care about her, to get a good job, like land a client. Like, it works for her. And again, I think her intentions, she can argue that her intentions are good. And so I don't think she's quite aware of how much of the problem she is. Like, what's that Taylor Swift quote? It's me, I'm the problem. It's me. Yeah, it's you, Emily. So I also just kind of wanted to point that out, that we talk about this a lot, like when we, especially when we work with individuals, like if you are someone that has really consistently challenging relationships with most everyone in your life, and or if you're constantly being surrounded by drama, then you have to think that you're the common denominator in your life, and not that you're totally responsible for all of the problems that exist in these dynamics, but you have some responsibility.
But I think the problem with that is a lot of people don't realize that they have so many challenging relationships, and that either it's been communicated to them in certain ways and they don't see it, or it hasn't been communicated to them and they think like everything's fine. And so there's like Emily wouldn't have thought that anything was wrong with her and Julian's relationship had he not said anything. Now he said something, and like, look, there she is still doing Emily. So she's just so unaware that like she doesn't even know how she's affecting people, which, if we're talking and we're using the word narcissism, like that is a pretty common thing. Like you were so to that point of being self-centered that other people's perspectives are not even on your radar.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. She's thinking of everyone in relation to her. Right.
I think it's fine. So it's fine.
Yeah. So Emily's relationship with herself needs some work, I would say, or her self-awareness needs some work. So that's all for Emily in Paris season 3. We'll see what Emily in Paris season 4 has in store whenever
if we watch,
if we hate watch it, whenever that comes out. But yeah, I'm glad it lined up nicely that we talked about unhealthy relationships, and we were kind of reacting to this because it really did kind of illustrate a lot of what we were talking about, and in the ways that it's kind of subtle, right? Like that these relationships exist and they persist, and yet they're unhealthy. Right. And